This is historic Mudcatcher Falls on the Ohio and Erie Canal in Cuyahoga Valley National Park. I'm Darren, and this is the Industrial Revolution. Let's zoom in a little bit so you can see it better.
The somewhat thin-looking creek flowing past us is what's here today of the Ohio and Erie Canal. As you can see, the water's just a bit low today. That's actually why Mudcatcher Falls was built here at the intersection with Gully Run in the first place. Streams like this were used to help add water to the canal, which worked well until farmers moved into the area, cleared the land, which led to increased erosion from the land, and increased sediment buildup in the canal. By building this mudcatcher, just a basic sandstone dam really, most of the silt settled down behind it, where it could be easily shoveled out as needed before it got into the canal.
So what's the big deal about all this silt and sediment and sand and stuff that we're talking about? Why do we need to build a mudcatcher or something like that in the first place? And the answer is that all this stuff builds up in the canal. It's stuff that washes down when it rains or just from regular stream flow. And while the water's moving, you can support a lot. But as soon as that water stops, everything drops. And it drops pretty quick. And I can demonstrate that here. So I have here a vial of scientifically engineered rock particles. They're all about the same size. This is actually about sand particle size. And I have a river simulator. Just hang on, this is my lake simulator. One moment. There, now I can get more agitation on this. So if I add sediment to this, this is like the rain washing this stuff in. And we'll add a lot. Big storm. Now while this is agitated, while the stream's flowing, all of that is suspended. No problem at all. But if you look at the bottom here, you can see as soon as it stops moving so fast, a lot of this settles out. And you can see this really clearly on the bottom here. And that's what happens in the canal if you don't catch that silt beforehand. So that's what a mudcatcher does. The mudcatcher doesn't catch everything that comes in. Some washes off the sides straight into the canal and things. And that's why you have to go out about once every year and actually dredge the entire canal. So in the winter, shipping shuts down, the parts of the canal freeze up, and you send crews out to actually dredge the whole canal. Early on, of course, this was done by hand. People with shovels out there are dredging it. And for the life of the Ohio and Erie Canal, it was pretty much done by hand every single year. But if you put in mudcatchers at the key points, now you can send people out behind those mudcatchers a couple times a year and very quickly and easily take out a huge amount of that mud before it gets into the rest of the canal. That means you have to go out and worry about the rest of the canal less often.
Aside from sediment buildup, canals really face two distinct and opposite problems: too much water and too little water. Too much water, at best, means canal boats can't get under bridges, and everything grinds to a halt, as we see here on the Miami and Erie Canal. Unfortunately, it's often a bit worse than that, and in 1913, massive statewide flooding caused so much damage to Ohio's canal network that, with railroads already in place and the massive costs involved to rebuild, the state's canals actually closed down. So canal builders developed systems, both automatic and manual, to reduce the risk of flood damage. Here's an example of a modern overflow on the Ohio and Erie Canal. While you can often raise or lower the water level by inserting and removing boards, the water level generally maxes out at the level you set. For a more manual method, or if you actually need to completely empty a section of the canal, you have something called waste gates. This is a modern version, but as you can see from the Tinkers Creek aqueducts, just up the canal from here, these waste gates have actually been used from the beginning. So if water management is sounding easy so far, remember that I've only talked about getting water out of the canal, not really about getting water in. In addition to things like mud catchers, the preferred way to get water into a canal is through the use of dams. Providence Dam here on the Miami and Erie Canal was originally built as a wooden dam in the 1830s. It was replaced with a concrete dam in 1908, just 5 years before flooding permanently closed the canal. Dams were placed along canals wherever they met up with rivers. This ensured an ample supply of water going into that segment of the canal. You can see here how the canal followed along the edge of the impoundment behind the dam, then turned off just above the dam. Sometimes there just wasn't enough water where you needed it, though, so you needed to install a canal pump. This one, built by James Watt in 1796, was used to provide water to the Bordesley Canal in Birmingham, England until 1854. Of course, dams were usually preferable and were often built since they didn't require any fuel and not much maintenance. But still, canal pumps then and now were sometimes needed. Today, with many dams being removed, canal pumps, such as this modern Archimedes screw pump on the Ohio and Erie Canal, are still used to keep canals filled up. There's one more big thing you need to do to manage water in a canal, which is that you need to ensure that there's always water moving along the canal. You don't want a lot of current, but you don't want the water just sitting there either. If the water isn't moving, you'll wind up with stagnant water, plant growth, and other problems. Additionally, every time a lock moves to a lower level, you dump an entire lock full of water from the top of the lock to the bottom. While this does pass a small amount of water along the canal, it's not really enough. To fix this, you add additional spillways around your locks. This means that you can pass surplus water into canals at the dams, and that surplus, anything not needed to operate the locks, will just spill around them via the bypass. And that surplus water will help to keep the canal water clean. So if it sounds like everything's covered, there's still a couple more complexities. For one, mills would often be built along the canal, using water from the canal to power their operation. If this sounds weird, it's because, well, it sort of is. Thinking a little deeper though, it does serve several purposes. First, it allows the canal to pass a bit more water through it, helping to keep the canal a bit cleaner. Second, and probably the main reason they did it, the mills usually had to pay a fee to the canal manager to take the water out of the canal. And finally, of course, since the mill is built directly on the canal, they obviously used the canal for much of their shipping, both raw materials coming in and finished goods heading out, generating even more revenue for the canal company.
So as we follow along the Ohio and Erie Canal here, you might notice it's a little dry. And actually this is a lot better than it looked a couple weeks ago when I was here. And this is what happens when your water systems fail on a canal. They did have this at one point up and at full depth and even operational at the lockup here, but it's not today. And part of that is that dams have been being removed along the Cuyahoga River. They planned for that, of course. They did actually make preparations so that the canal would stay operational here, but it didn't work out. They're still trying to work on it. The problem apparently is that some of the pumps that they installed along the canal to pump water up from the Cuyahoga River are not quite working as expected. You saw one that's working, and there's others, but it's just not enough at this point. Still, there's hope. The canal is slowly filling up. As I mentioned, it's considerably fuller than it was 2 weeks ago when I was out here. But there's other challenges. If it rains heavily, of course, a bunch of water flows into the canal, and then you have to get rid of it before it gets damaged. That's happening right now up in Minneapolis as I record this. The locks through Minneapolis on the Mississippi River are closed to private vehicles because of high water levels. So it's not safe to travel through there. And also you run into the opposite. The Panama Canal right now at the same time has been partially shut down and running reduced loads for quite a while due to insufficient water. So the problems that happened with canals before happened with canals still today. You have not only evaporation, but obviously you also have the fact that canals leak. They leak water in, they leak water out. They always do this, they always have, they always will. So you can see we've got a little bit of water coming over this lock. A couple weeks ago, it was barely a trickle. So they've apparently got a canal pump or something working up there. So it's improving, but it's a constant challenge. Through manual and automatic systems, you're constantly trying to maintain water levels in canals. From the beginning of canals, it's been a challenge, and it still is today. And that's part of why, as critical as these canals were to the Industrial Revolution, the often underappreciated art of water management on the canals, that is the Industrial Revolution. Before you go, I do need some help. Easiest thing you can do to help is simply like the video, also subscribe and hit notify. That goes a long ways towards telling YouTube, hey, these videos are worth watching, the channel's good, and it'll show it to more people. More people I have come in, bigger the channel grows. Also, if you can comment or participate over in the discussion tabs, that also goes a long ways towards helping with the video stats. It shows YouTube that people are actually participating and getting involved. I have a Patreon page at patreon.com/industrialrevolution if you want to help out there as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you at the next one.